Hello, Camp Pros. This is Oliver Gregan. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a summer camp professional.
And I'm Matt Hansberger. I am the executive producer of podcasting at Go Camp Pro. My pronouns are also he, him, and you are listening to First Class Counselors.
This is a series for camp directors to give to their counselors as they hire and prepare them for the upcoming summer.
And as we've said this for 26 episodes straight now, camp counselors, you have the most important job at camp. And that's why we do this podcast, because without you, campers wouldn't come back to camp year after year, because you are the key to their awesome experience. So thank you for what you do. And we're here to give you skills to keep doing the awesome things that you're doing.
So thanks for tuning in. Here we're going to cover one specific topic and cover the essentials as fast as we can.
Yeah, as fast as we can is kind of a loose and fast term around here, but it's the need to knows.
The can't go withouts.
The fundamentals.
The basics. And what are we talking about today? Well, there are many different ways to be an ally, because as we will talk about, allyship is about using privilege for good. And Matt and I have been lucky to have a little bit of privilege in our lives. So this episode, we're going to talk about allyship in general. We're going to go specifically zooming in on the allyship when it comes to men supporting women and addressing sexism in the camp industry. So to do that, we're going to welcome two wondrous camp women to the podcast. Matt, take it away.
Oh, I'm really excited to have fellow Go Camp Pro podcasters, amazing camp professionals, and people that I'm lucky enough to call my friends join us on here. So Rachel Kent and Ruby Compton are here. Rachel is on the board of the Ontario Camp Association, was a director of an all-girls camp, a friend of camping. She's a pandemic moderator for the Slack group and the Facebook group. And Rachel currently works in risk management and is the host of Beyond Camp, Go Camp Pro's newest, shiniest, and awesomest podcast. Rachel, so glad to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Thanks so much. I'm excited for this.
And Ruby Compton, the incomparable, the stupendous, the amazing Ruby Compton, the Chief Exploration Officer of Ruby Outdoors. Ruby has a long and incredible career in camping, is on the planning team of the Women in Camp Summit, is a fellow pandemic moderator. She is a great person to walk the boardwalk of Atlantic City with, and also is one of the co-hosts of, I'll say it statistically, Go Camp Pro's most famous podcast, Camp Code. Ruby, thank you for coming.
Thanks for that intro, Matt. That's awesome.
I hope you can tell from my excitement that we are thrilled to have you here, and thank you for sharing your experiences with us and kick off this kind of series on allyship. We're going to go, this is probably a little more serious, Oliver, than we've normally addressed before, but I think it's well time that we start digging into these things, because as Rachel Kent says, we can talk about hard things, because that's what we do. But before we get into the hard things, let's hit them with the quick fire questions, Oliver.
Yeah, so for those who listen to the show, you know that when we get a guest on, we like to learn a little bit about them so we can ask them a couple of questions and learn some more. So normally we have one guest, so we have two today. So I'm going to be asking you guys 5 really quick fire questions. Rachel, I'll have you answer first, and then Ruby, I'll have you go next. So Ruby, you'll have a little bit of extra time to, avoid the fire if you can. So I'm really putting you on the spot. Sorry, Rachel, but just answer them as quick as you can, and then we'll go to the next one. We only got 5, so we'll go through. All right, so number 1, Rachel, what is your favorite campfire food?
S'mores.
All right, Ruby?
Traveling tacos, Fritos with chili and cheese on top, in the Frito bag still.
All right. And question number 2, Rachel, a camp game that you will win every time?
Soccer, because I pick up the child and the ball and run down the field.
Ruby?
Everybody plays kickball versus me. So my entire group of campers are one team, and I am the only person on their team, so I have to score a home run every time.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Rachel, what is your favorite callback to get people's attention? What do you say and they answer back to get everyone looking at you?
Hey, listen up. And they'll say, hey, listen up back to me.
All right. And Ruby, what's your favorite go-to?
I'm a big fan of the Quiet Coyote.
Oh, this is the Silent Llama.
Yeah, whatever. It works. As long as, I really love alliteration. So Quiet Coyote.
All right. Okay. Rachel, what is your favorite, and we're going to say non-camp podcast that you are currently listening to?
Oh my goodness. That's really, I don't know that I'm listening to any non-camp podcasts right now because my world is entirely COVID these days, to be honest. So press conferences is my go-to.
All right. And Ruby, what podcast are you listening to?
I eternally beat the drum for the Mark Groves podcast. It's all about relationships and inner work, and it has changed my life in a lot of ways.
All right. And then finally, Rachel, if you had a career that wasn't in camping, so your chosen career, what career would you go into?
If I could do anything, I'd love to be an emergency room doctor.
Sweet. That's pretty cool. Ruby, what do you got?
I think I would have really been excited about engineering.
All right.
I don't know what form exactly, but I think building stuff and making it reality, very cool.
That's super cool. Both super great options. Those are two industries that are missing amazing candidates for their careers.
Amazing. Well, we're going to dig into things. Thank you for the quick fire questions. You have survived the fire. Well done. And because we are talking to camp counselors here on this podcast, we would love to know a little bit more about Rachel and Ruby's experience as counselors. So in a minute or less, or maybe 2 minutes or less, we'd love for you to tell us about that. So Rachel, would you start us off, please?
Yeah, so I was a counselor for a few summers. My first summer, I was a counselor for 13-year-old girls for the entire summer at a private camp in Ontario, not a camp that I'd gone to. So it was really my first experience with like a full summer of overnight camp, and it was fabulous. And I taught swimming. And then I worked at a camp for children with type 1 diabetes, working on the waterfront. So I've always been a water person, lots of boating and swimming, and then many seasons of outdoor ed, where I learned a love of ropes and all of the land programs and really like honed my facilitation skills in outdoor ed, I would say.
And Rachel, is your experience in mixed gender, single gender? What environments are you used to being in?
Yeah, so as a counselor, I worked always in co-ed camping, and it wasn't until I started directing that I worked in single gender camping.
Okay, cool. Ruby, how about you?
So my camp counseling all happened at a YMCA camp in Nashville. That was a day camp the whole time that I was a counselor. And then we built a resident camp, and the year that opened is when I progressed up into leadership staff. So co-ed, 600 kids on site every day. That's where I learned large group management for sure. And then also outdoor ed. I'm glad you said that, because that's where the rest of my frontline time and facilitation and training has come, was after college, working 4 years at an outdoor ed program that I adored. So, and all my environments have been co-ed.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing. And Oliver, we haven't talked about our counseling experience in a while. Can you give us a quick rundown for yourself?
Yeah, I originally was going to be a history teacher, and all of a sudden one magical summer, I ended up going to camp because I knew I couldn't be teaching opportunities during the summer. School's out, so I ended up going to camp, and I got bit by the camp bug and stayed forever, and I never want to leave. But I got to work with CITs, so counselors in training, and that first summer was super memorable because I kind of was teaching them skills on how to empower and strengthen and help and, make other people become independent and grow while they were still doing it themselves. There's, this big muddled mess, obviously, of just awesome leadershipness, all kind of falling into one. And I loved it. And it was great. And if there was the ability to go back and do it right now, I would be sitting in that cabin having a great time, playing some card games and enjoying some time with my boys from the West Lodge. I had
And Oliver, did you counsel males, females when your CITs? Did you have both?
Yeah, it was a bit weird. So the CIT like village or unit was co-ed, and then I oversaw just the boys, and then during the day I would have girl campers as well. So it was actually really cool.
Oh, neat.
I can say that I've been a counselor for both genders, which was for males and females, which was great.
Yes, yeah. And then my quick background is my first ever cabin as a counselor was a girls' cabin, which was really, really fun. And then one of those girls is actually one of my good friends to this day. And she hated me as a camper. I was that like weird boy, and I was weird as a 16-year-old too. So she was right on the money. And I'm glad we're friends today. But I've been in co-ed camping my entire life. So great. Okay, so now we kind of know where our compass and our bearings are set. Why don't we move into allyship now? And Oliver, I think you'll take the reins for this one.
Yeah, our first question for really the two of you is, what does being an ally mean, and how is that kind of connected to privilege? And Ruby, can you kind of kick us off a little bit of, that meaning of being an ally?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I think about the question of being an ally, I think one of a great question that was once posed to me by Travis Allison himself was like, do I get to just claim being an ally, or does someone have to like give that title to me? And I don't have a good answer for you, but I can tell you things that I've seen folks do that made me feel like they were my allies in a situation. The biggest thing is being able to perceive, tell, know, because you've had a conversation or you just know each other well enough that if I am not feeling empowered or brave or comfortable enough to speak up and call in whatever is challenging or frustrating in the moment, that person who maybe has more privilege or has more of a say or just is more comfortable and not feeling triggered or emotional at the time, they speak up and say something. I think that's a great act of allyship. I think sometimes it's about seeing the needs before someone has to ask and kind of taking care of those needs or removing barriers, but also asking the question, what do you need? What do you think? Here's your seat at the table. Your voice is important in this conversation.
Yeah, I love the way you started that off, Ruby, with saying what have people done for me that have, made me feel as though they're an ally? And that's such an important thing, because, in my head, I'm trying to think of all the ways I can be an ally, but sometimes it's just really important to sit back and listen to somebody else and say, like, what do you need? How can I be an ally for you? And that's fantastic. I really like that. Rachel, do you want to try and conquer that question? What does it kind of mean to be an ally to you?
Yeah, I think I'm going to build on what Ruby said because she said it really well. To be an ally it's a verb, not a noun. It's not just like a state of being; it's a state of action. You have to, and that's not my own saying. That's definitely something I saw on Instagram, so I won't take credit for that. But it's about constantly doing things, and it's not about doing things for somebody else or in their place. You're not an ally to somebody by doing things that they could do themselves. You're an ally to somebody by creating space so that they can do it for themselves, and then you elevate them. So when I think of allies, I think of people who are giving me or others opportunities where they may not be able to easily access them. It's opening the door for them and then stepping aside so they can walk through that door themselves.
Yeah, Rachel, I love continuing with that. And I think, or at least I'm thinking a little bit, you kind of hit on that access to privilege, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're helping do something that maybe they couldn't have done. Am I right there? Or can you kind of open it up a little bit more?
Yeah, so when we talk about privilege and being an ally, it's using that power, because with privilege comes power, and it's using that power to open it up to other people. So it's looking around the room and saying, who isn't present here right now, and how can I allow them into this room and give them some space? And I know it's an analogy we use a lot, but I really feel like to be an ally is to first recognize your power and then say, how do I use this power for good? It's not just recognizing it, it's then taking action on that power and privilege that you have.
Yeah, it's like kind of calling a superhero to the mound, like saying like, hey, like it's your time to step up now. You have this power, use the responsibility. Matt might know better than me, but what's the thing they always say to Spider-Man? With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, you got
Totally,
it.
yeah.
Everyone just unmuted on the Zoom call at once to answer that. We were all like, we know Spider-Man. Oh yeah.
Everyone's like, we know where he's going with this one. Ruby, do you want to talk a little bit about that privilege though too? Like, do you have anything to add off of what Rachel was saying?
I know we're going to dig in a little bit more to the question of gender, sexism, et cetera, but we did a call last year leading up to the Women in Camp Summit where we talked about allies and how to be a better ally. And this was a suggestion brought up by somebody on the call. And I think this example just is such a great example. And it was, in your organization, it'd be really great if the males in the organization were the ones going to leadership saying, hey, we need menstruation products in all the bathrooms. It doesn't matter what gender the bathroom is labeled, we need to have those products there. And so you're asking for something that doesn't benefit you. You're asking that's going to benefit everybody. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. And it's such a great illustration of allyship.
Yeah, I had one of my male counselors do that this year, and I was so proud of him. I was like, oh man, thank you so much. And I also, Ruby, I love examples. So keep throwing them out. If you have more, let's keep hearing, because a big part of our show is practical skills. So now I hope any male who is listening to this, who goes to camp next summer, you walk right up to your director and you say, hey, I just want to make sure that this is happening. Do we have these feminine products for my co-counselors or my co-workers who are out there who need them? All right, Matt, do you have anything that you wanted to add to this just before we move on?
I just hope that people are watching on YouTube, because my favorite reaction is all the snaps and the head nodding that's going along. Rachel and Ruby are just dropping knowledge bombs on us, and I love it. I would say something that I've been thinking about when it comes to being an ally is how curiosity factors into it as well, and the fact of doing your own research on being an ally. That we have Rachel and Ruby who have agreed to join us on this podcast, but Oliver and I we know what our privilege looks like. If we really think about it, we know where the inequalities exist, and if we don't, then we can do research on it, because there's amazing people out there who have done extensive work on sexism in camping specifically. And a couple Google searches and asking of camp leaders, you'll find those answers. So I think about being curious and doing the research, because how that counselor who asked for the menstruation products to be more available, they need to know that struggle and that inequality exists first, but they can't wait to be taught that by females. I think being an ally means you're constantly reevaluating and asking what is needed, what is missing, and then taking action to respond to those needs as well. So that curiosity, I think, consistent curiosity is a genuine part of being an ally.
Which, if I just want to add real quick, is like, it's a muscle to be flexed and strengthened, right? And sometimes we get into, the world we're in right now, it makes it very hard to do any sort of higher level thinking. And yet the fact that the conversations that are happening around race and the conversations that are happening around equity in the world right now, that's just becoming part of normal everyday life. And that's very cool. So when you're going to camp this summer, think about how you can keep flexing that muscle and lifting that weight every single day this summer.
Yes, certainly. And the one thing that this conversation has made me think of, I'm not sure if anyone out there is familiar with the Riddle scale. The Riddle scale being an inclusion scale specifically focusing around homophobia, but it's like the scale of where you are in terms of your relationship with LGBTQ folk. And it starts at repulsion, is where the lowest level that you are repulsed by somebody, which is obviously nowhere near where you should be, where anybody should be. And then it moves all the way up. They use the word nurturance, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but the definition I think is really great. The definition of the highest part of the Riddle scale is assuming that gay and lesbian, that's what this definition says, the LGBTQ community are indispensable in our society. And that people on this level view the LGBTQ community with genuine affection, delight, and are willing to be their allies and advocates as well. And just that idea of the indispensable, that the world is better with the diversity that comes with men and women, with the LGBTQ community, with people of color in the camp industry, that we are better because of that diversity. I thought that was kind of striking to me. Oliver, do you have any thoughts to wrap this question up?
Yes. I kind of always go back and I think about when I was in school, we were always taught to tolerate other people and who may have beliefs or things that are different than you. And it was so strange to me. And I kind of accepted that answer because I was in, school and I was still learning and still maturing. And it's so important that you're not just tolerating people sometimes, but you need to finding that way to accept people and getting to that level of understanding and advocacy. So when you see someone who may have a different point of view than you or may have circumstances that are different from them, you're starting off with this level of understanding of what is their situation, so that your brain can start to work on thinking about, is this person have the things they need, like the feminine products, like what that Ruby brought up before. I think starting and then finding a way to advocate, starting to work from there, educating yourself, and then, taking that action and actually going and asking those questions and making things happen for the people that you can use your privilege for to help out. And that's kind of where my head goes. And for me, I try to always disintegrate myself back to, I'm a learner. I'm still trying to understand. I will never truly understand. And hopefully one day I will get to that point. Because if I ever get to this point of like, I know your problems, or I think I know everything, or I'm certain, then I've lost that growth mindset that I need to actually be an understanding person. And I don't ever want to be that person in this situation or in any situation in life. So that's really where it hits for me. Yeah.
Thanks, Oliver. And I'm excited to zoom in a little bit more on this. So let's talk now let's put we'll go back in the Wayback Machine in our brains to our time as counselors, or even our time as camp directors, and experiencing the life of a camp counselor. Where have we as a group seen inequality between men and women in the camping industry? Where have we seen sexism, whether it was overt or sneaky sexism? Where have we seen that exist? And we'll turn it over to Rachel to start this one off, please.
Yeah, just as we were chatting, I was like thinking back to when I was a counselor and we had wide games, and there was always like a group of people who were the chasers in the wide games, and they would call themselves the wolf pack at this one camp I was at, and it was only made up of males. It was just like part of the culture that it was just the guys that would like chase all the kids. And I'm not very athletic, but like I can run. I could run faster than some of these guys that were part of this group, but it just like girls were not invited. It was just this like club of the guys. And I don't think that they meant it like intentionally, but it was just this like piece of sexism that existed in the culture of the camp it was there for years, and it was like a big thing to try and break that. And I've also seen it in places where like there's skits to be done at camp, and as girl counselors I was like, well, the boys are the funny ones, like it'll be better if there's boys in the skits, or like the girls, you can talk about these things but like the boys will have the funny skits. And I was like, girls can be pretty funny too. And like looking back at those, I'm like, wow, like there were actually a lot of moments as a counselor where it was just accepted in the camp community, and those stereotypes were just sort of perpetuated.
And Rachel, let's kind of, in our idea of being an ally here, what do you wish would have happened like that in those situations? Where do you think a male ally could have stepped in and done something better in that circumstance?
Totally. I think it took a male to say, who was in that group, to say, hey, like, come and join this. Like, that's all it took was, hey, like, come and be here, or come be part of this skit. Come and do this with me. All it takes is that invitation. It's really like, it's not rocket science. It really just takes an invitation to look around the room and look around the wolf pack, the skit planning group, the activity, and be like, who's not here? There's no girls here right now, and just bring them in, and then bring them in and listen to what they have to say, and put them in a position where they can contribute, not just there tokenized, like sitting in the corner.
Thank you. I feel like when we talk about allyship and get into a topic that's heavier like this, people think that it's this big opportunity where you are going to have a lot of power to lose, and being an ally, there are going to be chances where you're going to lose your power, and that's part of it. And it's not always a big thing like that. It's as simple as an invitation. And I think that awareness that something is wrong in this situation. So Rachel, I love that. It was a micro thing to zoom in on. Ruby, how about you?
Yeah, I know you said one thing, but I'm going to give you four, but they're all micro things that happen at camps across the country all the time. Day camp, overnight camp, urban, rural. These things happen everywhere. How often have you heard the sentence, can I get some guys to help me with this? Can I get some guys who are strong to help me with this? Some of you strong guys, right? And the way we phrased that in the Outer Ed program I worked for was, who's feeling strong today? Can I get some volunteers who are feeling strong today, right? So sure, there's still some of the, the boys all be like, oh, that's me. But like it at least offers the invitation right? We're not assuming it has to be a guy. I think about how this is actually something that's very real for me right now is I work in a restaurant where there's a bunch of stuff that I need pretty regularly that's stored on shelves that are too high for me. I cannot reach them. The only way I can get them down is by asking one of my taller male coworkers to get them down. There's no step stool. And it's like such a little thing, but every single time I'm like, oh, that thing I need to get down again. I have the thought I don't belong in this kitchen. And so how are you storing stuff at your camp? And are you making it physically inaccessible for some folks? That's something that happens. Think about what kind of problems you're taking to which directors at your camp. So your camper that punched another camper, are you always going to the male director? The camper that's homesick, are you always going to the female director? And there are strengths all around. So we don't need to always follow these kind of gendered thoughts and paths. And then lastly, from my teacher and education background is being conscientious about calling on an equal number of all the genders at camp, right? So we don't always call on the boy. We don't always call on the girl. That was actually part of our evaluation at a program I worked for, where the evaluator was supposed to take note of how many times they called on the boys versus how many times they called on the girls, or non-binary students. We actually added that later on. So 4 little things, but I guarantee you've probably seen at least one of those in one of your workspaces.
Yeah, thank you, Ruby. And I love the small shadow to an allyship of just a language switch. That's all it is to say who's feeling strong today, which is awesome. Oliver, how about you?
Yeah, I snap my fingers like crazy with the lifting things up and fixing stuff because as the person that I am, I'm a larger person. I am physically capable, and I 100% have been called into those things over, female coworkers who are just as capable, and people just go, Oliver, I need you for this. Can you come pick up this, bag of things? And I get upset because I'm in a position where I'm like, this other person is just as capable. I know you're asking me because I'm a male, but also I get upset as a male because now I'm just this person who's here to lift things up for you. I have a brain, I have a personality, I'm emotionally a human being. So please do not think that I am your human forklift to carry things around. I will still move it because I'm a very nice person. It needs to get moved and the job has to get done. But nonetheless, please, there are men out there with brains. They can do things too. Other than just lifting
Oliver,
things.
it sounds like it's really hard to be stereotyped and typecasted. Sounds like
Thank
that
you
sucks
so
a lot.
much, Matt. You are 100% true on that. But yeah, and I think that's such an important thing. And thank you so much, Ruby, for bringing it up, because I've sat there for years and kind of just gotten the job done because it had to get done. And then, years ago, when I'm starting to mature as an adult and realize that this is happening, I started to try and find ways to get, females more included. And thank you for providing examples that I can use in the future. And I think it's great. Some other things that I just want to hit on real quick too were just positions for men. When I became a camp director, I noticed this maybe not at my camp, but maybe at other places where like the ropes director for some reason has to be a male, or it has been a male for the last 20 years, and you don't even think about it, and you just keep hiring a male for that position. You never question it, you never think about it, and you even get into this ingrained mindset of when you talk about that position, even before you hire it, it's a male, where you say, oh, the guy that we have to hire for the ropes position, and you just, as a camp director, for me now, I look at it and go, all right, that person doesn't have a gender yet. Why? Like, but it happens, and camps get into that. So if you're somebody who's maybe in that hiring process or might be hiring people, try and see if you can eliminate that like the genderization of certain roles you might have. And I think that's really important. And my last point is that caring aspect. I know that Ruby hit this a little bit, is like, you're going to that female counselor or that female leadership person to take care of campers, to make sure that the care is really well done. I call out men a little bit here and say, you fill those roles too. You should be just as important. And you should be making sure that campers have their water bottles and that they're not getting burned in the sun, and that they're not just being tough guys because they can make it through. Like you have to be a caring counselor as well. And you shouldn't just lean on or say, well, that's what the girls do, because now you're continuing to genderize these things that really shouldn't be. But yeah, those are my little points there that I just want to make. But I mean, everyone's so smart.
it's nice having a room full of smart people. I would just say, like, I think Ruby touched on this, the situational, or Rachel said this, the situational awareness. Like, this is not right, because there's not equal opportunity here. Just looking around the camp industry, especially growing up, I would hope that we're moving in a positive direction, but my sample size is small. That as a camp director who's hiring staff, it is, in my experience, it has always been incredibly hard to find males, right? To find a male counseling staff, it is wildly hard. And to the point where we just started hiring more females, and females counseled the young boys, and that was fine. And it was totally cool. And then as you move up the leadership ranks, it starts to skew towards men for some reason. And what is that reason? It's because sexism, and it's because of like inequality and the glass ceiling and all of these things, that when you go to a major camping conference and you look at the attendee list, you look at all the round tables, and you see a lot of old white men as the senior staff at camps. And it's not necessarily those old white men's fault, but they need to be the part of the wolf pack that calls in the women and brings them into the space. They need to, we need to look at that and see why that happens from starting at the counseling level. So where are those happening, all in like the opportunities that are offered, what special jobs are being given to your fellow staff members, and is that equally distributed amongst the men and the women and the non-binary folk at camp? And how does it start at the ground level? And you as a counselor should know that it is a problem in the camp industry, that there are a lot of old white men in power. And then why does that start? Look from your thing, and then start to dismantle that from the ground up. And I think that's what we're going to start to talk about in this next question. Oliver, please.
So we want to zoom in on equality that females face. So what can male counselors do to be better allies to their female co-staff? And Ruby, you started hitting a few of these things, but what are some more actions or examples that we can do to really just kind of learn? And I wrote in my notes here for this section is, I don't really have a point. I just want to listen and I want to learn. So please share with us the things that we can start to do as males to help.
So I think first and foremost is, don't be afraid of the conversation. There was one summer at camp when I was a director that I split up my staff into male, female, and wherever folks felt the most comfortable, whichever group, they had to pick one of the two. And then wanted them to talk about, like, what are some specific issues that this gender faces that you might be uncomfortable handling or whatever. And what was so interesting is immediately both groups started talking, and they're like, but I want to know what the other group's talking about. Like, can we get together? Like, did you plan for that? And so making sure that, yeah, it's important to have single gender spaces sometimes. And also it's important to normalize that these aren't closed doors. Like, some of the conversation that happens there needs to be shared so that we can all work together more appropriately and more comfortably and more respectfully. Because if we don't ever have any sort of system for addressing those challenges that are coming up, then that's a problem. And I think a really specific thing is, I've been impressed the last couple of times I've taken my wilderness medicine research, that my instructors have been really frank with the guys about, like, you need to get comfortable talking to female participants about periods. And if you're not comfortable with that, like, it makes them feel clammy and weird. And so you just need to be like, yo, like, I'm okay with it, like, and even if you're not, even if on the inside you're freaking out about it a little bit, that goes a long way for folks feeling more comfortable in that space. And so I think about, what are those other things that we've kind of always said, oh, that's a girl topic, or like, that's a boy topic, and how can we shed some light on those?
No, yeah, I think that's really important because, I was just able to take a lifeguarding course, and even my instructor was so fearful about addressing, where do you grab on a female when you're trying to make a deep water, a deep end rescue or something. And it's important to say, oh, no, you're going to grab her under the armpit by like on the right side of her chest, right, with your left hand. So you're grabbing across the body, and just being comfortable with like, just even saying things as simple as like where to place your hand. But those are great points. Thank you so much, Ruby. Rachel, do you have anything that you would want to share as far as, what can males start to do to become a better ally?
I think they can look around their summer camp or their outdoor ed center and think about like what are things that are really treasured and looked up to at camp. Is there like a wide game where there's like a specific role that everybody wants to do, but it's only open to males? Is there like, are there really cool tasks that you get to do? Maybe it's like a dump run that like the maintenance folks only take men on, or like male staff on, and things like that. And start to look at those things where like girls aren't present there, where females aren't present. And then start asking why. Just be like, hey, like, why is it that the male has to play this role at the, like our end of summer campfire or whatever it might be? Just like start asking those questions so that other people can start thinking about it, because chances are like it's just gone on for like 20, 30, 40 years that people aren't realizing it. The girls might all realize it, but they need somebody with that power and that privilege to say, hey, hold up, like, why can't we start to make a change and look at this a little bit differently?
Yeah, the phrase "I've noticed" is a really powerful one to just say, "Hey, I've noticed that there never seems to be a female running this program. I wonder if there's a reason behind that."
That's such an important point because we're so, covered with tradition in camp that, how many other biases or things that are covered up from those traditions that may have been existing for so many years that we never even thought about, because that's just the way it's always been. The sentence that killed a camp.
Exactly.
Uh, yeah. Matt, do you have anything that you'd want to add into this that you've learned in your personal experience while trying to be an ally for your fellow male counselors?
Yeah, this is me talking to my 16, 17-year-old self. Is Matt, shut up. Stop talking. Um, there's so many times when I, as the keener that I was, just wanted to answer a question and just wanted to volunteer and jump into things. And I didn't realize that because of my privilege and power as a man, as a young man, that I was going to be chosen. I was more likely going to be chosen first, especially if it was a male that was doing the choosing. Through no, and it's not like I made a choice to close the doors for other people, but I did do that unconsciously. And take an extra, I learned from our friend this great thing, like take an extra beat before you raise your hand. Take an extra second, listen to someone else's. Maybe don't add your point into a conversation, build off of something that one of the women in the group said, and to emphasize and to highlight their voices. Yeah, so shut up, just shut up a little bit, and it might help a touch.
Matt, can I take off that really quickly? Is that when you like hear, as if you're a male and you hear something really great that a female says, is to repeat it and then say, and she said, and like name the person who said it. Don't take that point as your own. Like say it, elevate it, and make sure that the recognition is given to the person who has said that.
That is so dang smart. Thank you.
Yeah, I always feel so powerful when it doesn't matter if it's male or female, but somebody made a great point and they're just too quiet saying it. And then I, as a very loud, boisterous camp person, go, hold on a second. I just want to let you know that so-and-so right here, they made a great point. You need to hear it. Thank you. Just throw that camp self in there and get it done. Um, yeah, I really think that's so important for us to start activating ourselves, as we kind of talked about it before, as our like kind of superhero advocacy. And sometimes what Matt was just kind of hitting on is, sometimes we're trying to be an advocate and sometimes we kind of step on our own feet too, right? Like we are trying, like as an ally, you're going too far. And I think, Rachel, you hit it right in the head there, where it's, I'm trying to be an advocate, but I'm being an advocate for this person, not me. Don't focus on me, focus on them. And that's so, so, so important to realize. And I think that us as camp pros can do that for sure. Matt, I think you have something that you want to talk about a little bit that is an activity or maybe something that people can get involved with to start being allies in another way.
Yes, I have to confess something that we're going to start to talk about the Women in Camp Summit, and I this is an interesting thing of allyship is that at my camp growing up, the director is very geniusly, because Beth Allison was one of our directors, made space for the women at our camp to have a women's affinity group where they could talk about what makes. I don't know what they talked about because we weren't privy to those. And there was always a small part of me that was like, I love all of those people that are in there. And I just want to know, I want to be better. I want to, again, being that keener, obnoxious 19-year-old at this point. And then the Women in Camp Summit started. And I was like, oh my God, there's these amazing women in camping that I want to be friends with. And they're talking about some cool stuff, that, like amazing things. And people say how great it is. And 25-year-old Matt still wanted to be a part of that. And I think that there's a point where it's just like, okay, the space isn't for you, privileged white guy. This isn't a space for you. And sometimes those spaces will open up opportunities by their choosing for men to walk into that space, or for the people in power to enter and learn from that space. So we're going to start to move in to talking about the ally event that the Women in Camp Summit are adding to their amazing roster of programming. But just in case anyone out there, especially for you female identifying camp professionals or young budding camp professionals out there, let's give a quick rundown of the Women in Camp Summit. And joining us, not coincidentally, is somebody who's on the planning committee who was with the Women in Camp Summit at the onset of it. Ruby, can you tell us about why the Women in Camp Summit was created and what some of the goals are about it, please?
For sure. So if we rewind back to 2018, beginning of 2018 and 2017, this is when Me Too really blew up as a social movement, right? And I think what that allowed was a lot of stuff that was going on for lots of folks was brought into light, and you started to see conversations happen that had not happened for a long time, an acknowledgement of stuff that hadn't been so great. And I think at camp, we're like extra guilty of being like, camp's perfect. Everything's great. Everything's great at camp. Everything's perfect. And the reality of it is, if you like peel back a little bit and you start looking around at the camp conference and you go, yeah, you know what? There are a lot of female speakers, but mostly it's the men in the big rooms. There was a series of conferences, of national conferences, where we had a Thursday 8 a.m. keynote of this week-long conference, and it was always a woman, and it was always the morning after a big conference-wide party. And you kind of go, okay, hold on, right? You start to look at the wage data, and there are wage gaps in the camp industry, very similar to what you see in other industries. But nobody was talking about it. Nobody was talking about it. And so I end up at a dinner table at a conference, as happens, with a bunch of smart folks, and one of those being Colette Marquardt from ACA Illinois. And she said, you guys have been talking about doing a women's gathering, women's professional development event. I think it's time. Let's do it. And we were like, cool, that sounds great. 2019 sounds like a great time to do that. And she said, no, let's do it this year. And so in 6 months, we put together our first Women in Camp Summit, and we have been going strong since. So what I have seen be so interesting and exciting about it, Matt, you're talking about like collecting all these cool people and putting them in the same room. Like, yes, that's one piece of it. Is I am fortunate. I get to travel all over and go to all these different conferences and meet all these extraordinary women. And I think about, gosh, if we got all these women in the same room, like we can do anything. And so that's something that's really joyful, is the community and the connections that happen. And also, as we've experienced at the summit, but also at events that we have then hosted at other conferences, is the conversations that come up, that it is not uncommon for women professionals in many industries to feel like, man, I'm the only one who has this problem or this challenge or this struggle. I'm the only one. No one else deals with this. I must be inadequate because I'm the only one who deals with this. When the woman sitting right next to her is dealing with the very same thing, feeling the very same thing, but we've been told not to talk about it. And so holding these spaces where women can feel the permission, the empowerment, and the trust and the safety and the bravery to have some of these conversations and go, I'm having that problem too. And one thing that was so shocking was hearing at several conferences all over North America was women who were year-round directors saying, yes, my male directors and counterparts expect me to do childcare for their personal children more so than the other directors at camp because I am a female. I heard that story countless times. And that's when you go, there's some work that needs to be done.
Certainly. Wow. And I'm so glad that the movement has started and it's going online this year. Rachel, as a participant of the Women in Camp Summit, you often on Beyond Camp, you met your co-host at the Women in Camp Summit. And that's where that friendship started. Can you, for female identifying camp professionals or directors who would pass this on to those folks might be listening, tell us about your experience as a participant and why somebody should attend.
Yeah, so I had the pleasure of going last year, so 2019, and I'm super stoked for the virtual event this year. All the lead up to it has been incredible. The thing that made this conference different, the summit different from everything else I've attended, is the sense of confidence that I walked out with, that I could step into my power and own that power. Like there was a whole community there to build me up. And I've been in situations since then where I've been like, am I not speaking up because I feel like I don't know enough? Or am I not speaking up because I'm female and I feel like that is not going to be respected or I'm not going to be heard? And so I've like been able to challenge myself with the confidence that I gained at that summit to be in situations and think about like sort of call myself out on behaviors and be like, am I just not stepping into my power here? Am I not having confidence in myself because this is how I've been conditioned to be, versus like I deserve to have a seat at this table, so like let's step up there. And I got that confidence, I think, in large part from the Women at Camp Summit, because you're just surrounded by all of these people who are building you up, who are giving you a chance to fall if that's what you need, giving you a chance to fly, and also like speaking openly and vulnerably about their like fears and failures and successes as well. And so I encourage everybody to go just for that sense of confidence.
And the number of folks that have told us every year that this is the professional development I didn't know I needed,
Totally.
it warms the heart a lot.
Yes, I can't wait. I'm so glad that it's happening despite the pandemic. So Ruby, as just good for you folks for the extra lift that this is going to be, because you built a conference and then 2 years later you're also building it from the ground up again. So good for you folks. And then the ally event. Can you please share for any gender people listening to this podcast, why was the allyship event included this year, and why should people attend?
Yeah. So all along, and I would say it has grown significantly over time, we've been asked by folks who are not women who say, how can I help? And truthfully, we didn't have an answer necessarily from the get-go. It was a bit of like, we needed to get together and talk about some of this stuff. But also being able to create space, like we mentioned earlier, to acknowledge privilege and ask questions without judgment. We live in a world, I don't know if you've noticed on social media, that it's pretty judgy, right? You put something out there and people will be very unkind and I can't believe you said this or whatever. And even if it's a well-intentioned question, we don't get any of that tone. We don't get any of that context. And so we see this Allies event as an opportunity to take away the judgment and instead replace it with curiosity and education and conversation. And this is an opportunity to ask the questions that you have and go like, I don't even understand why there needs to be a Women in Camp Summit movement. Like, cool, come be in this room, and I think you'll understand more, and you'll hear it from other folks who may have the same privilege as you. And it really is an opportunity to do some of the work, as we have been saying a lot lately in a lot of different situations. I can say we hosted a session at the OCA a couple years ago, and a longtime camp director, we called it a brave space. We talk a lot about brave spaces in our summit. And a director came up and he said, I was really nervous about coming into this space, and the way that you all facilitated it, you made it okay for me to ask questions. You made it okay for me to misspeak and be wrong. And you made it okay for folks to share their story. And I took so much more out of this than I thought I was going to. And I'm expecting we'll hear more of that after our Allies event this year.
Thank you. So just for listeners out there to get involved and register, check out the show notes of this episode, as well as the show notes we just released. One of, I think, the best podcasts probably in the entire world, where Rachel and Ruby, as well as 5 other of our female Go Camp Pro podcast hosts, got together and blew up a Zoom room with just amazing conversation, which I encourage anybody to listen to. Check out those show notes in any of our 6 podcasts to find out about the Women in Camp Summit. But looking here, the Women in Camp Summit will be December 2nd and 3rd. And you can register via the link at our show notes or through acail.org/women-in-camp-summit. You might have to add .html at the end there. But also check out the show notes for the Becoming Allies Supporting Women in Camp event, which is Friday, December 4th, from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. It's online, of course, and you can register there or also donate towards the Women in Camp Summit. There's an Allies fund that they're trying to raise $7,500, I believe. Is it for scholarships for the conference itself, Ruby?
Indeed.
Yes. So let's help them get to that goal so more people can experience the life-changingness of the Women in Camp Summit. And with that, we're gonna move in. Before we thank Rachel and Ruby for this time, Oliver, let's get into the eggle.
Ooh, yeah, let's get into it because it's so important. It's our ever growing and ever learning. Got to have that growth mindset going on. And tonight I'll lead off so we can see a little bit what it's like for our guests. But I am going to be showing off my little trick tip game song for counselors to use to get better every day with my wonderful little fairy letters. So I'll zoom in onto the camera. So if you're on YouTube, you can see this.
So cute.
It's a very, very tiny origami folded letter, and it's addressed to the Fairy King. And you can open it up, and then inside there's a little letter that's written with very tiny writing, because the Fairy King is a small person, and then you can give little missions from the Fairy King to your campers. This specific one was, I was working with some kids doing these glow jars, and the Fairy King was specifically asking them to make these glow jars so that the fairies can find their way home and put them on their windowsills at night. So it was a fantastic little thing. It worked really well. And then I fielded a bunch of questions about fairy magic, which was a lot of fun and constituted myself getting covered in glitter, which, if you look, I may still sparkle a little on YouTube. Those are my fairy letters.
Can we raise our hands if we want to be in Oliver's cabin and be his campers? Because that's a hard yes for me.
100%.
Also, did you write that letter? Is that your pen personship?
That is my handwriting. If you'd like, I can read you the letter. It's very quick because it is such a tiny piece of paper.
Yes, please.
Dear friends of the fairies, the winter fairies need your help. This winter has been dark and long and made it difficult to find our way home. Please use some of our fairy magic to light our way home. Make these jars glow and place them on your windowsills to help. Much thanks. In the name of magic, the Fairy King.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I love that.
But they can be used for many other purposes. You can have these little letters and you can put them on camper bunks or whatever, and just little notes from fairies saying cool things that kids can do. And the folding is so easy. If I can do origami, you can do origami. It's so easy. And then like if you were to look at it, it's addressed just like a real letter, and I did fake stamps. It's great. Cool. All right, Matt, do you want to show off your eggle, and then we'll let Ruby and Rachel show off theirs?
Yeah, it's definitely not as cool. Yeah, we just shut down the podcast right now. No, mine is a very quick game, courtesy of Joe Richards, my friend. He had a coin in his pocket and needed 2 minutes to stall, and that 2 minutes turned into almost hours, and I mean literally hours of play. The game is called Heads or Tails. Everybody stands up. You grab a coin out of your pocket. As it's in the air, you either put your hands on your head or your hands on your butt. If you are correct, you stay standing. If you're out, you sit down. And it is that fast. And you play until there's one winner, because every time you're eliminating roughly 50% of the people, and people get crazy. I played it with a group of 3rd grade boys at the school that I'm working with now. I didn't even have a coin. I had a Frisbee and I threw it. And we did that for a 25-minute recess. My plan didn't even do anything because they wanted to play heads or tails. You can also play heads or tails tag, where they're spread out and they choose heads or tails, and then the heads chase the tails or the tails chase the heads. But just, you can start very simple. Heads or tails. That is my angle. Rachel, please.
Yeah, one activity that I loved was the eco police. And so kids would sneak around camp and have little cards, and they would like sneak into cabins and be like, you didn't turn off your lights. And they would leave like a little note, turn off your lights. And sometimes you get a fine. And so as a director, the kids would sneak in and be like, oh, like you left your lights on, or the AC in the office running, or the door open or something. And it was really fun. Or they might come in and they might have an idea for like how you could be more eco-friendly. And I thought it was a really cute way to get your kids engaged with what's going on around camp and the environment.
So good. The eco police, and getting called out as a camp director. That the kids must love doing that too. That's awesome.
Oh, absolutely.
Ruby, how about you?
All right. Well, I'm going to go outside of gender norms, and I appreciate Oliver talking about fairies. And you may be familiar with the nature activity of building fairy houses. And it's a fun activity. And sometimes people are a little nervous to get involved with it because they're not into fairies, which is fine. So I do that same activity, but I say, okay, we're in the forest. And the forest, did you know, is protected by ninjas. But they're getting a little lazy lately. So we need to build some ninja training grounds. And so we're going to use the natural materials that are here to build those training grounds. Oh, and also the ninjas are only about 2 inches tall. And then, a few other boundary setting, and they go. I love when groups will like capture bugs and be like, this is the final challenge. They have to, defeat the beetle. I have seen my 18-year-old staff be like, no, I'm not done yet. So it's a great way to do some nature exploration. They get their fingernails dirty. Like if there's dirt under their fingernails by the time we get done with the activity, it's been a good day.
Holy crap. Best eggles ever. Call it, stamped it, no erases. Amazing. Before we wrap things up, Rachel, Ruby, thank you so much for being here. Just fun talking to fellow podcasters, and also even better, I think we covered a really great starting ground for some of these conversations, and we hope that you'll come back to explore more allyship conversations and more crossovers with Go Camp Pro podcast. If Oliver and I can weasel our way onto Camp Code and beyond camp, that would just be, we'll just make our days. So thank you. Is there anything that the two of you wanted to say as we wrap up? Anything you want to plug that's going on in your lives that you think is super cool? Awesome. Thank you so much. Oliver, let's wrap things up.
All right. So real quick, if you want to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me at oliver.gregan.scd@gmail.com. And Matt, if they want to get a hold of you?
Yeah, It's Matt at gocamp.pro. Rachel, if people want to get in touch with you, how might they do that?
They can always send me an email at kentr@girlguides.ca.
And
you.
Ruby, if they want to get a hold of you.
Ruby at rubyoutdoors.com. You can also follow the at Women in Camping Instagram page to keep up with the Women in Camp Summit this year.
All right. And if you enjoyed today's show, we'd be so grateful if you left us a review wherever you are listening to this podcast. Your ratings and reviews not only tell us what you like and don't like about the show, but helps boost our rankings and helps more people discover the show. And in this case, also, it's a great way for us to learn how to be better allies if you send us your methods too. Matt.
Yeah, please. And we would love for you to send us some feedback to continue this conversation or other avenues left unexplored. That helps Oliver and I think of new shows, which is always a bonus. So please don't forget that you can find our show notes at camphacker.tv/podcast. You can find our 6 shows there, or find us specifically at gocamp.pro/FCC. Feel free to tune in, and we'd love to. You should listen to Beyond Camp, and you should listen to Camp Code as well to hear more awesomeness from Rachel and Ruby.
And with that being said, thanks for listening, friends. And remember, camp is camp, and camp is all good.